Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. You are tuned in to the Spotlight series. I am Zach Ritter, and I am the Interim Associate Dean of Students at Cal State Dominguez Hills, which is SoCal, Carson area. We have a special guest today, which I'm excited about. But first, I'm going to tell you who Community Works Institute is. Please go to communityworksinstitute.org. Joe Brooks is the nonprofit director. And thank you so much, Joe Brooks, for letting us utilize this space. Community Work Institute provides professional development for K through 16, K through 20 educators. There are different institutes that you can attend. And I've presented at some of my colleagues have presented at some, and yeah, just can get some professional development tools and techniques, and also equity and justice skills for your administrators, for your classroom, for outside the classroom. But I really enjoy working with Community Works Institute because they bring the classroom to the community and the community to the classroom. And they do this cool like ethnography with students where they give them a camera and give them a note and a pen and pad, and then they go out and like discover new stuff in their neighborhood. And it's cool. I don't know. And we're excited to get back to it now that we're kind of coming out of this COVID era, hopefully, fingers crossed. So Jill Housen is somewhat in the house virtually. I know Jill from Progressive Jewish Spaces, and you're just a really interesting like community organizer, and you're doing some like progressive stuff that I am very envious of, and I want to know more about who you are, right? So tell the folks who you are.
Well, hi Zach, thank you so much for having me here today. This is very exciting to connect and be here with you. So I am what I would say I am a ready facilitator and consultant. I have a consulting agency called 3W, and we are 3 Jewish women of color. We approach everything from the heart. So I like to say that, I don't know, I'm a dot connector. I'm a storyteller. You know, I try to like move people from this idea that anti-racism work to come out of their heads and kind of move into their body and into action.
Okay, I want to.
We kind of get stuck here.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff I want to touch on that. Okay, so first, tell the folks like who you are. Did you grow up in Southern California? What's going on with that?
I was raised in Claremont, California. Okay. Very small college town. Very few people of color. My sister and I were the only Black children at our school. And so that was like a whole lesson in early trauma. And on the bright side, I became the fastest runner in my school because I was chased home every day and I learned how to sprint home. So my parents were educators in Pomona. And grew up in a home that was just kind of steeped in activism. My father was very, very much involved in creating equitable educational systems in Pomona, the next city over. We're in Claremont, which is more of an affluent community, just making sure that these students are getting the same type of education that I was getting. So that's the type of home that I grew up in. You know, dinner conversation was always around education and always around equal access. So that's what I became very used to.
Yeah. So they folks say that like Black folks have to know about white folks in order to survive, right? And so it sounds like you learned that from a young age about like what is what at school, and maybe did that set you up to do equity justice work because of some of the BS that you had to go through growing up?
I tell you what, when I hear people say that this whole concept and this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion and anti-racism that, you know, we're learning and it's going to take a long time. You learn very quickly when your life feels threatened. It's a quick study. So, you know, I call that, you know, I call foul on that. So yes, it did set me up because I've been doing it all my life, either in with individuals or in groups, you know, just not getting paid for it.
Free labor.
All of the free emotional labor. Yeah. Yeah.
Having to hold everyone else's pain at the same time, right? What was your parents' like vision for like what they wanted society to look like? Because it sounds like they were really in the trenches doing the damn thing. What were they hoping for?
I know that I think that they wanted a world where my mother, who is in her 90s, who still waits for me to get home at night. That is like the world that they did not want. So they were envisioning a world where they maybe did not have to like stay up and wait for me to come home, a world where they felt safe because there was a lot of fear. There's still a lot of fear. You know, my mother's still afraid for me to go out when it's dark. So those kinds of things. I mean, very simple. You know, it's not fancy. Just a world where they felt safe and where they felt safe for their children, where I could move around, where I could get a job and get the same type of pay as my coworkers, where I wasn't going to be harassed, where people weren't going to be yelling things. I can go on, where people weren't going to be yelling things, you know, out of the windows at me, where I could find housing, you know, simple things like that, basic life.
And we've come some way, but we haven't come all the way. And some people say it's the same crap, different day.
Yeah.
Did you have any teachers in K through 12 or in college that you were like, oh damn, that I would like to be like that person someday, or they unlocked something in me that I didn't know about myself?
No. And no, I went through all of elementary school, middle school, high school, without seeing an instructor who was a person of color. I did not have a Black professor until I got to college, and that was just one. Wow. And I remember him because he was my sociology teacher. Yeah. So I really didn't have anyone who, you know, I would say my parents were my best teachers. You know, and those kinds of conversations that you have with family members, where you're just kind of sitting around the table, and you're having like these very deep conversations. Or really, I was like that kind of kid that was like always listening in on the adult conversation. You know, I was that kid. So hearing them talk about things that happened when they grew up, and I still listen to my. That hasn't changed. I still listen to my mom when she's on the phone with her friends, to hear her talk about going into a department store and seeing her friend on the second floor where it was whites only, but seeing her up there having a milkshake, and they're just kind of looking at her laughing like, look at her, you know, because like, look, she got away with this. You know, those are the kinds of things that I take away. Those are the lessons for me.
Wow. How did you know you wanted to do, and tell the folks again the name of your consulting business so that they can access it, but how did you know that you wanted to do equity, justice, diversity consulting?
Well, because, you know, it is something that I have been, like I said, doing for free for quite some time. And then I had an opportunity, I did a fellowship with the Union for Reform Judaism. I did their Juvenation Fellowship, which was a diversity, equity, and inclusion fellowship. And I met two amazing women. And we just decided, let's do this, because we've been talking about it and we've been doing it. And we all come from different walks of life, but like the three of us together are so very powerful because we all like kind of bring this different flavor. You know, we've got a Sephardic Jew, an indigenous Mexican Jew, and me. And so it's just very, very powerful the way we approach things. And so I think that meeting them is something I'm very, very interested in collaborative work, because I think that that's just very appealing to me. And so when I met them, I thought, this is the time. This is the time. It's not something that I wanted to do alone.
All right, let's get into it. Jewish spaces, we met in Jewish space, and as we know, Jewish spaces, especially in LA and New York, can be very Ashkenormative, and so folks that don't know, Ashkenazim are like my folks that come from Eastern Europe. Ashkenaz literally means east, right? And Sephard means Spain, and Mizrahi means like east, like further east. So what is it like navigating Jewish spaces and these are progressive Jewish space or liberal Jewish spaces that are very European Ashkenazi, white?
I mean, it's a tough room. It's been very difficult, and at times it's been heartbreaking. And I think it is because it's difficult to wrap your mind around the concept of being oppressed while also being an oppressor. So that's a very, very difficult concept to wrap your mind around, and to kind of take yourself out of centering your oppression and your pain. And also this idea of, so there's the white Ashkenazi culture that we have developed in this country, that there are people who look like me, and we're kind of over here. So we're not a part of that culture. So it's kind of hard to really think of Jews of color as part of the mix. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like we're still kind of thought of as unicorns. Well, there's only one of you. Well, so we really don't have to focus on this. Mm. I don't care how many Pew reports or how many census reports come out. There's still, it's like, well, in our congregation, we haven't seen anyone. So this is not important. This isn't important, so. And, and also like centering, and I'm not in any way, shape or form trying to diminish the Holocaust, because I'm not at all. But, there's a time and a place to discuss that. And when we're talking about anti-racism, we maybe want to leave that out of the conversation.
Because that, in your experience, have folks tried to, I don't know, recenter themselves in their own history in terms of European genocides, maybe not to build solidarity, but to say, but what about my pain, and your pain is less?
Well, then we can get into the oppression Olympics, and then it's just, we're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. I believe that maybe if we're having these conversations in Europe, then we're having a completely different conversation. But when you talk about the experience of Black and Brown and Indigenous people in this country, it's a different conversation. It's a very, very different conversation.
And yeah, that's interesting, because I feel like, because my dad is a refugee, I often have these conversations with him, and he, 74-year-old man, so he has his own, bag of tricks, but he kind of gets it in some ways, because he's like, it's not about the oppression Olympics. The terrible stuff that happened to him, and his family was 76 years ago. But he's like, there's stuff that's happening today that we need to focus on who's, what they talk about, whose house is on fire right now, right? And this is why we're always talking about Black and brown folks and even poor white folks, and there's Muslim folks and disabled folks. There's so much to focus on. Yeah, no, that's real.
I mean, I feel when I get nervous as a Jew is in service. I think someone could come in here and kill all of us. I feel nervous just walking out of my house sometimes as a person of color, as a Black woman. Like anything can happen. That's something that's just real. So that's like all the time, all the time. And then when I'm in service, I feel nervous. That's the difference. That's the difference.
So it's like the Kimberly Crenshaw, not only double bind of being like a Black woman, but then I'm also a Jew. It's like the three triple bind.
And I should not have to choose which one, but there's always having to choose which one.
And then you go to shul, you go to temple, and this is supposed to be somewhat of a safe space where I'm supposed to be spiritual and get in touch with, the higher power. And folks are like, so like, did you convert? Like, how did you become Jewish? Like, do you belong here? And all that type of stuff, right?
Literally, why are you here? Do you know, do you know where you are? Who are you here with? There's all of these questions, yeah. Or just the assumption you're a convert. What was that like for you? Or, my family, we're real Jews. Like, you're, I don't know what you are, but yeah. So it's not always comforting, so it takes a lot to find that space where you feel that you can just kind of go and be spiritually fed and kind of drown out the noise.
Dang. Okay. Growing up, like, did you have friends in K through 12 and then probably changed in college, but that you could vibe with and talk about these issues of being kind of like an insider outsider or perpetual outsider? Did you find your folks?
Strangely enough, I do have the same friends from elementary school. I do. And it's been an evolution, the conversation. I think that I tried so hard to fit in elementary school just so that I wouldn't get beat up. I don't know if you've ever seen like that movie Clueless with the unfortunate Stacey Dash, or what is that? The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air with whatever the lightheaded one was. But anyway, I was like not lightheaded, but just kind of trying to just fit in and make myself small and not speak up too much, so that I could just fly under the radar. And then as I got older and got kind of started to find my voice, I think it's like once I moved to Los Angeles, I moved to Los Angeles, and that's kind of when I kind of like, there are Black people. There are Black people. Wow. Like, did not know that, besides my family. And making those connections and really tapping in to that, besides just, like I said, just like my family and what they were giving to me, but just hearing other stories and hearing other perspectives. That's like when I started to have the conversation with my friend
and
about
so
how it felt.
So we're both educators, and you're having these and we do these difficult conversations, in private, in public, for work, for not for work. These are people that you love and care about. How do you have those conversations where it's like, hey, I love you, but these things that you've been doing have been very hurtful to me, and I know you can never really walk in my shoes, but I need you to like trust me and understand when I tell you these things are happening. Like, how do you do those conversations?
Well, I think, so I've kind of developed this reputation, even like within our consultant groups, like Jill's just going to say what she's going to say. And then my partner goes in and smooths everything out. I just don't have it in me anymore to try to, it's just life is too short.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think I'm really, really good with speaking my truth. And I do have a good friend who I remember distinctly sitting at lunch telling her this fear that I have of the police. Now, this was a long time ago that I told her I had a fear of being pulled over by the police or being falsely accused of something. It was very, very real for me. And her just like saying, her exact words were, "You're an idiot." Like that, like that, like, how can you even feel that way? And so I just kind of let it go. But we have revisited that. And so what I've told her is, you do not get to tell a Black woman, when I say that something is racist, when I say that something doesn't feel good, you don't get to question it. That's my truth. I know that. You don't know as a white person. You will never ever get to weigh in on that. So just take my word for it. And you can ask me questions about it, but don't try to say, well, what about, or it could be. No.
So basically, she was, I mean, basically gaslighting you, right? It's like, that's not happening. It's like, it's all in your head. There, a lot of gaslighting happens like all the time. And for folks listening to this conversation, what would you tell them? Like, how do you work through that? Like, because it psychologically messes with you. How do you work through that?
So what happens, and I think this happens with a lot of Black and people of color, is we start to second guess our own reality all the time. Something will happen, and because we have, and especially Black women, have been assigned this very, very narrow scope of emotions, being happy and pleasant all the time. So when something happens, I might register an emotion, and then I'll go away and say, but wait, did this really happen? Like, maybe I'm overreacting. I go through this whole thing. And I have to like check with someone, like, did that really happen? Are you upset too? Like, am I really okay being upset with this? Which is ridiculous, right? But that is the effect of being gaslit from childhood. You say that something happened. No, it really didn't happen that way. Like, you shouldn't be upset about that. They didn't really, it's always about the other person who didn't mean what they were saying. And you shouldn't be upset about what happened to you. So you don't get to ever be upset about anything. You never get to have that emotion. It's wrong. All of our emotions are wrong.
I mean, that would lead a lot of folks to just lose their damn mind. I mean, so.
Well, I think though, this is how we got the trope of, Black women are so strong, Black women are so resilient, the angry Black woman, because we're like this. I mean, it just reminds me of the presidential debates when we saw Kamala Harris with that smile plastered on her face. I mean, because that's what she had to do, because heaven forbid someone say that she's being aggressive or she's being angry, or,
Remember she kept going, I'm speaking.
Yeah, but I'm speaking right now. I'm speaking. Yeah, just the right to speak over us, the right to, but, we have to say it in a pleasant way too. Because in what reality do you not get to speak passionately about your pain and have someone tell you, I'm only going to listen to this if you say it in a way that I want to hear it. I can only take your pain in a nice way. And if you don't say it in a way that I want, I'm not going to listen to you.
So, and we know which head the fly landed on. They landed on the thing. But I just forgot about that. You reminded me right now. Okay, the fly. But okay, but seriously, like, you just hit on something big. In the work you do, I think you probably try not to coddle people's feelings, but what you just said about I need to say it in a way that's not going to offend or hurt this person, or they're going to hear what I'm saying. You mentioned earlier, you say it how it is, and then like your other colleague kind of translates it. But how do you do equity and justice work like in a workshop? And you have to kind of coddle some of the white folks, or maybe some of the like just non-Black folks, because everybody's coming at this from different angles, and we often don't talk about like Latinx, issues or South Asian issues, because there's just because those folks are folks of color doesn't mean that there's internalized racism and a whole bunch of other stuff going on. There might be some K through 20 educators listening right now. They're like, okay, cool. Like, I get it. Like, like racial justice stuff, but like, what can I do? Walk us through a little bit when you go into a workshop and you're talking to some folks that are not really understanding what you're saying, but they're just going to be silent, right? Because they know what not to say and what not to blah, 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 so they don't get called out. How do you, it's like dancing on eggshells. It's nuts.
Well, first of all, we don't, and I, again, work primarily in Jewish circles, but we don't begin a process without community guidelines. So we're going in with a list of, this is how we are going to be in community together, and we need to agree to this. And that, includes how we communicate with each other and what types of questions we're going to raise, and are we going to stay on topic, and all of these things. And there are things that we need to add to this, right? And, so we kind of have this whole setup, and we have like our garden, or what used to be called the parking lot. We have all of that set up. And then we also do a lot of breakouts so that people, sometimes people aren't comfortable speaking in front of the instructors or the facilitators. So you can have time to distill that and to unpack that amongst yourselves and to come back. But if people are getting defensive and outwardly defensive, my question to them is like, why, like, what is it? What are you feeling right now? What is it that was said that is causing you to feel that way? Because not everyone is having the same feeling. So there's something that's going on in you that is making you feel this way.
Okay, so let's jump into that. Oftentimes in race, class, gender, justice circles, we don't always talk about like feelings and emotions and how what someone just said is passing through the body. And I think sometimes then people like close up, or they grit their teeth, and then afterwards they rant online or take it out on a person of color or a woman or whatever. Tell us about that mind-body connection in the work you do with justice work.
Well, like I said earlier, I'm always trying to bring people out of their heads and into their feelings. So like, what are you feeling? Someone told me one time, I'm not really fond of flying. But if something's going on, if I'm getting nervous or I'm feeling anxiety and I'm looking around the plane, no one else is having this reaction. So why am I feeling this way? What's going on with me? So I'm always asking, what's going on with you? What are you feeling right now? I'm always asking people, how are you feeling? And we're always checking in to see how are you. We have like a wheel of emotions to ask people. We're always checking in with people's emotions, because even if you're reading the books, you're in the book clubs and you think that which is excellent. We do need to be educating ourselves, and you're having emotions and you feel like you're doing something. It can be exhausting, just mentally exhausting, but you need to move it into your body and move it into action. And what are you going to do with all of that knowledge that, you're having a physical reaction, but it needs to move into action from that place. So we're always asking people, give me steps based on what you've learned today. What are some things that you can do? What can you do in your organization? What can you do in your community based on what you've learned today?
Excellent, excellent. Because I did a cat Isabel Wilkerson's book called Caste in a Jewish space with older, predominantly Ashkenazi folks, and it was a congregation. And I guess I was just really gung ho and excited about the action steps that could be taken in this community to do, I don't know, start like a reparations fund, or do affordable housing, or do, I don't know, some like racial and environmental justice collabo, or even just looking at the kind of the day school curriculum and being like, whoa, why aren't we talking about Sephora, like, who's Black, right? Why aren't we talking about all these other folks that are like Middle Eastern and Black and brown in our scriptures, in the Torah, or just modern day. And I was taken aback. Like you said, people had read the books. Robin DiAngelo, right? White Fragile. They were quoting like line and verse, like they knew the stuff. Mm-hmm. But there was like this wall, there was like a block of like the action and the community action. Because I was trying to show them receipts, and I was just like, it's 1% Black folks in your neighborhood. So like you're reading the books and you're saying the good things, and I love you for doing that. But are y'all doing something to challenge these systems? Are you at the neighborhood council meetings being like, we need affordable housing, we need to change the housing covenants to not say, don't sell to Black and brown folks. Anyway, I'm talking a lot, but I'm passionate about this issue. Why do you think there is that wall of, I've read the books, but I'm not really doing the things to make that systemic change?
So I think that it is a lot more than saying, I've read this book and I'm not going to do this anymore, right? I mean, we know that science has shown that we have to develop an entirely new neural pathway in our brain to actually do these things, and that takes action. And so I think, and another thing I think too, is that sometimes the way we deliver this information is very academic, as I'm talking to people in education, but it is very much like a classroom setting. And, when you're done with chemistry, you're done with chemistry. You're going home and, you're just not taking the beakers with you and the chart. This isn't happening. And I think that's how people kind of look at it. I did the DEI thing. I'm done. I'm going home. I'm making a brisket. This is great. We're doing Shabbat. And then when I come back to it, I'm fully engaged because I'm in this setting. Like, it's something that has to be, everything needs to be seen through this. I go into these places all the time. Everything you do has to be seen through an eye of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not over here. It's not that we're getting a new roof and then we've got the DEI thing. And, and then life is going on. Everything you do, when you're hiring that roofer, who are you looking at? Who are you looking at? It all has to happen that way. But because it's an adjacent and not incorporated into the fabric of the organization, people miss that. So, that's why we're always like, give me action steps, all the time. And also really impressing upon people that it's not enough to say, I read this book and I'm not going to do this. And another thing that I always ask people too is, why are you here? What are you afraid of about this work? And what are you willing to give up? What are you willing to give up? Most people that I speak to are afraid of losing friends. I'm afraid of losing my life. So this is the divide we're working with. I will tell you, I ask this all the time, and it's like, I'm afraid of losing friendships. So this is the divide, and what are you willing to give up? Didn't know that was a part of it. So we are not willing to divest of any power or anything like that. I just want to hold on to all of it and be nice about it. I'm going to be nice about it right now. And that's not going to work.
That's Robin DiAngelo's new book, right? Nice Racism. And we don't know how to share power. We don't have how to give up certain things. I'm curious, what do people say that they want to give up in these workshops?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay. So they're honest about it.
No, it's like that. That's a question. Like that was a trick question. Not ready to answer that. And I have no idea. What am I willing? My time. Like it's really like a difficult one. Like I don't know how to answer that. I didn't know that there was anything that I was going to have to give up in order for this whole thing to work.
Yeah. So wow. So that's just, yeah. Okay. Well, I've never done that in workshop.
So we need to be having different conversations. People need to be going into this. If people are fueled by emotion,
yeah.
This is not going to be a sustainable journey. Mm. It's not sustainable if you're angry or you're going to be unangry one day. And then what? You know, if you're guilty, you're not going to be guilty one day. And then what? Then you're going to need something to happen. This is like why I think, you know, this country is like so addicted to this trauma porn, because they're fueled off of emotion. And once that emotion dies down, I mean, we're already seeing how interest in all of this is dying down because people are just, they're over, they're on to the next thing because they were fueled by emotion. And now they're kind of like, well, it's wearing off and their whole interest in it is wearing off. You have to have that knowing within yourself that this is a wrong that needs to be corrected. And that's it.
Do you think that doing this work in Jewish spaces makes it easier, harder, or medium? Because the texts talk about slavery, right? The texts talk about Pharaoh and abuses of power. The texts talk about David and Goliath and the underdog, and I think you hit upon it earlier that it's an uncomfortable truth of being someone who's downtrodden and being a minoritized group, but also being an oppressor at the same time. Maybe there's folks listening in and if they're folks of faith, is it easier or more difficult doing this justice work in faith communities?
I think because I have an attachment and a love for my community, it's emotionally hard for me because my heart gets broken. So it's easier for me to be outside of my community doing this work because then I don't have that, you know, I guess I have an expectation that I don't have going into other spaces. But so I think it's for me personally, and I hear it from other Jews of color that, yeah, it's hard for us. It's hard for us working in our community.
Yeah, wow, to go to work every day and get your heart broken is
yeah. I mean, and to feel othered all the time and to feel like we're not really a part of the community and like we're still like trying to like earn our place, right. Which is, heartbreaking and infuriating at the same time.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so being Ashkenazi Jew and talking to other Ashkenazi Jews, it's like, well, you know, there's Uvila McCoy, and there's what's her name, Lana Kaufman. These are Black Jewish women that are doing this justice work in mostly Ashkenazi spaces in America. And I think there's this. I think the Jewish world is having its own kind of identity shift, crisis, whatever you want to call it, and I think there's an interesting backlash from, or I don't want to say backlash, or discomfort or adjusting period with Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardic Jews and Persian American Jews. I feel like sometimes in some conservative Jewish folks I've talked to, it's like, it's too much of emphasis on Jews of color, and I'm not comfortable with it. So it's like mirroring kind of some of the backlash that we're seeing in the larger American whiteness. But how do you see kind of things being expanded in the Jewish world with in terms of Jews of color and other identity issues?
Well, I mean, we need to see ourselves reflected in leadership positions. I mean, we need to see ourselves on boards, people who are making decisions. I mean, I'm like really pushing right now for instructors to be people of color, to be Jews of color, so that children can see themselves reflected in day schools, and even adult education. There's like, some amazing instructors out there, teachers. So I think that when we get that kind of balance going, I think that will be really instrumental. If you build that space, the people will come. As long as, if I go on a website and I'm looking at the website and I don't see anything that looks like me, why do I want to visit your shul? It doesn't seem like it's going to be a very inviting place for me if it's not representative of the diversity of our community. And I think that that's the big lie that's out there, is how diverse our community is. I think that a lot of people have just opted out of going to say, how are we reaching those people? How are we reaching those people? So it starts with leadership. It starts with leadership. I mean, and there's like some tremendous, rabbis that are Jews of color. I don't see them. All of that stuff, if we could see that, I think that would make a tremendous difference. A tremendous difference. Because I'm just everything.
I agree. I mean, you and I met through eCar, which is one of the more or most progressive shuls that I know in Los Angeles. And there's not that many folks of color in positions of power. And I spoke with my old shul, actually the rabbi that bar mitzvahed me, and he's a big name, and I was trying to talk about like Black Lives Matter, and maybe we can get involved in some politically progressive things. And and it broke my heart because he was like, I'm kind of for what you're saying, but my constituency is pretty conservative, and I can't publicly come out and put my stamp of approval on what you're trying to do here. And so, oh man, like what did Dave Chappelle say in his latest thing? He was like, all these institutions lie to us, right? And so when our faith communities that we've kind of grown up in or thought to trust, and then it's kind of like it's a business. It's not necessarily about I don't know, opening the heart or opening the mind. It's maybe it's a little bit of that, but it's also a business. And so I don't know. I guess my question is, with okay, Israel and Black Lives Matter's stance on Israel as an apartheid nation, like how have you tried to navigate being a Black Jewish woman in 2021?
Right, with family in Gaza. It's complicated, right? And thankfully, because we do make that boundary going into spaces that we're not going to discuss that. We're here to talk about anti-racism as it pertains to this country. So we're not going to have those discussions. And I think that, we just cut it off from jump. So I'm not having those conversations. But it is difficult as a Black Jewish woman when I hear we can't support Black Lives Matter because they don't support Israel, but I'm a Black Jewish woman, so you're saying you don't support me out in the world. But I guess you support me when I'm sitting in the pew. That's the only time but really, but once I leave, I have no support from you. I'm on my own. That's a part of the othering, though, of you have to choose one or the other. It's almost like, again, like you don't really exist. There's no such thing as Jews that are Black or Indigenous, First Nations people. Like, we don't exist.
That's terrible. It's terrible. Is the thinking behind we're not talking about Gaza or the West Bank or Palestine because it's going to be too much emotions, too many feelings, and too much chaos, and people are just going to go at each other?
Well, it's derailing the conversation from what we're here to discuss, and that is race relations in the United States. And how do we make this country an equitable place? So talking about Israel and Palestine is not advancing that cause at all. I've listened, I've heard Mark Dollinger speak, and I think, he does a good job of tying that whole thing together. But I don't know. I'm probably like not the one to lead those discussions. Probably not the one. Yeah.
When you were in college, were folks talking about the issues that you and I are talking about now? Like could you have open dialogues with folks about geopolitical stuff, about racial and religious stuff, or do you think things have changed a little bit now and people are like willing to at least talk about it?
I would say at my colleges, or I was not a part of those conversations. People may have been having this. It just seems like it's very different. I think my generation was more remain silent, get a good job, don't cause trouble, like just the opposite of John Lewis. Don't get in good trouble, don't get in any kind of trouble, and just do what you're told so that you can get a job and provide for yourself. So it was all about assimilating. It was all about assimilation. That's how I feel,
Yeah.
And I think that now, I love seeing this. I love seeing that the way people are. I think it's much more open, and conversations, having those difficult conversations and just kind of going for it. We did not do that.
Interesting. Things change and things stay the same, right? Because I worked at the Claremont colleges, at Harvey Mudd College, and you drive 10 minutes over into Pomona,
yeah.
and it's very working class and it's very Latinx, and you're like, maybe this is purposeful, that there's like 0 fast food joints in Claremont, and they call it the land of PhDs and trees, and it's very like well manicured, and then the houses are through the roof, and then you go over to Pomona and it looks different, right? And maybe it was the same way when you were growing up, and I was just working there a couple years ago.
Well, when my family first moved here, we moved from Ohio, and we lived in Pomona. And my dad apparently saw something changing, shifting in Pomona, and he said, well, we're moving. Um, and so that's how we ended up in Claremont, which, you know, both my sister and I have said, don't know if that was the best idea. Like, it might have been better for us to stay in Pomona. Like, I would have loved to have been around a more diverse group of people. More, you know, I would have loved to, you know, I didn't, yeah, that's like a whole, like, another, like, me laying on a couch and us talking. But yeah, you know, I wish that, I kind of wish we would have stayed. But yes, it is very purposeful. When people, when Black people especially, try to move to Claremont now, they are encouraged to look elsewhere. They are encouraged to look. There's a city called Rancho Cucamonga. They're like, there's some great homes there. You should look there. These are, I mean, and people tell me this. I mean, I know people who work in real estate, and like, you know, really my family has been here forever. So I feel, I mean, and we were like, we kind of open, like, it's our fault that there are Black people in Claremont now. Like, we did it. You know, we kind of, we are the people who made that possible. So, but there are very, very few Black people here, and it is deliberate. It's deliberate.
Yikes! Yikes! Yeah, my ex-girlfriend's family moved to Rancho Cucamonga, and they're Puerto Rican and white, and yeah, there's, I mean, even in Rancho, there's a lot of conservativeness, but
Yeah.
you're right. That's interesting. Real estate. We don't talk enough about real estate agencies and real estate work as reaffirming redlining, and some of the justice work. I mean, that would be amazing. We should be doing justice work in real estate companies.
We have people do research on redlining in their own communities, the history of redlining in their communities, just to get an idea, because there's not a part of society that oppression and racism does not impact. Healthcare, education, housing, food, it is everywhere. So that's just one little thing that we have them do, because people live in their bubbles. Do you ever, like, you know, we have doubts. Do you ever wonder why there's no diversity in your neighborhood? Is that, it's never dawned upon you why?
Yep.
You know, when you encourage people to make friends with, or to get to know people who look different from you, but there's no one in your community that looks different from you. Why is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was reading Adrienne Marie Brown's new book, and she was saying, she quoted this other person, now I'm forgetting now, but it's very good that you have a Black Lives Matter sign in front of your house, but what does your household look like, right? Who are the folks that come in and out of that house? Who do you invite over? Who's living in there, you know? And yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. Okay. So the Olympics are coming up, right? And we're seeing all this like black stuff, right? With the swimming caps, you know, you can't be too big, because if you have big hair, you know, it's bad. And then the Tanzanian women being the teenagers, right, being turned away because their testosterone is considered too high, and Sha'Carri was because the weed thing, right? She was kicked out of the whatever. For young Black folks, for young non-Black folks that care about society changing, they're consuming this kind of doom scrolling on their cell phones, right? And they're just seeing all this terrible news. George Floyd, right? Oscar Grant, like Tamir Rice, all these folks being killed, Sandra Bland. I don't know, what advice do you give these folks that, like, don't let all of this stuff paralyze you from doing something in society or whatever? Like, what advice do you give folks?
Well, one is don't do the doom scrolling. Like I very much limit my time on social media because it's very, very, very depressing. But then I watched The Summer of Soul and like life affirming, right? Life affirming. Just, it's like, who knew? So there are a lot of positive things. I mean, and always, the arts are always going to bring it back around. I mean, there's great music happening. There's great things happening in the creative world. So, I mean, I would always encourage people and to like find some type of a creative outlet. Well, I think is key, and to have like that great support group. Cultivate those good friendships that can kind of talk you down from, because we all, as a Black woman, I go there and I have to call people like to get me back to that place of equilibrium. But I am a huge lover of music. So I'm like known to I take breaks throughout the day and just listen to music just to kind of get me right. But whatever works for you, like find something joyous. There is still joy to be found. And I think that's like the beautiful thing about Black people. Like we will find some joy. We will through, food, music, art. We're creating things all the time.
I love that.
Yeah.
Finding a way out of no way.
Yeah.
And there is a kind of like Chance the Rapper and a bunch of other artistic folks have kind of popularized like Black boy joy or like, Black girl joy. And you're right. There's, in light of all the destruction and doom, Black folks do make joy. This is true. What are some of your creative outlets that keep you sane throughout the week?
Well, like I said, I am like all about music. I listen to all kinds of music. And then I like words and language a lot. So I'm learning Arabic now. And so that's just something that I like to do. I'm really a huge lover of words. Like you can just say a word and I'll just have to like be with that for a minute. So those are things. And then I like I'm a gardener. So I am out with my plants. And that's the other thing is like, within like this is like my chosen profession is diversity or racial equity, diversity and inclusion. But we are capable of doing so many things. And that's another thing that I would love to see is when we're looking at people of color, Black people, to not just kind of pigeonhole us into that DEI space, because we are capable of doing so many other things. Like I said, I'm a gardener, and I like to hike, and I'm just out, I'm outdoors a lot, just taking in the sun. I'm really, I'm a simple person, just whatever's quick and easy, just grabbing little moments throughout the day.
I feel that. I have two questions for you, and then I know we got to wrap up, but are your parents, I don't want to sound cheesy, are they proud of you, or are they like that you like carried on the educational mantle? Like how do they feel about the work you do?
Well, so my dad passed away in 94. I like to think that I'm very, very much like him. Like we're the only two, like the other ones. But I would like to think that he's very, very proud of me. I think he always said, just do the right thing. Just always like make sure that you're doing the right thing. So, and speak up. Speak up when you see something that's wrong. Like, don't be afraid to speak up. So I feel like I'm doing those things. And I think that I feel like he's with me. So yeah. And my mom is very proud of all of her kids. So yeah.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
I mean, I wasn't a doctor like she wanted me to be. I wasn't a doctor, but she's still happy.
I love it. Some Catholic folks see the beatification of Junipero Serra and they're like, oh, I can't ride with this. They see not allowing women to be priests and they're like, I can't do it. They see like, you know, the new Native American or Native Canadian grave sites being dug up, right? The little kids in these schools that ripped from their parents. And now we're gonna start excavating our 350 Native American schools. And Pope Francis hasn't really commented on it, but he's meeting with some of the Canadian parents. And they've left the church, right? What is it about, and we're a little different, right? As Jews, we don't have like the temple because it got destroyed. But what keeps you in the community and not leaving the community, even though you know some of these folks are not speaking your same language, are not vibing with you? What keeps you coming back?
Well, I like to think of it as one very large dysfunctional family. You know, you've got that one uncle or that one, you know, your cousins, you know. So, I mean, and our Jewish values are what keep me coming back, because they tell us that we can't not be doing this work that you and I do. And that is why it is very much a now type of a practice, not to wait until, you know, we're going to get this big reward when we die. It's about doing it now. And that's what keeps me going back again and again.
So you, okay, I know we got to wrap up, but you hit on something interesting that my father often talks about, which is nothing's promised. There is no reward because there is, we don't do the next life thing, right? We're like, well, we don't know what's going on. That's not part of our thing. But because Jews were so proximate to Christians for so long, and in Europe and other parts of the world, that we've adopted some of their stuff. But if there's no, this, I have some friends that ask me this, and I'm sure you too. All right, so let me get this straight. So you follow the 613 good deeds, or right, mitzvot, but what's the reward, right? What's in it for you? So you don't have this afterlife thing. You don't, what do you tell those folks where it's like, because I want to see a better world, or because the Talmud, like you save one life, you save the world? I mean, what do you tell folks?
Yeah, but do you know, it's like we're planting seeds. Again, look, I'm a gardener. So I always think of, you know, back to that, I'm planting seeds that I may not see that tree grow to its full life, but I am like planting seeds for future generations. So it's imperative. I have to do this work. Like I said, we cannot not do this work. And that is what is in it for me. I cannot stand by. I can't even hear someone say it's for the young people to do right now, or, you know what, you know, as long as I have breath in me, this is the work that I'll be doing.
Yeah, that's right. Because you and I are benefiting from the fruit that someone else planted, right? And so it's
exactly
to plant those seeds. Yeah,
we got to keep it going. We have to keep it going.
Jill, this has been heavy. It's heavy. Yeah, man. All right, before I do the closing out thing, did you want to say anything to the world before we go?
I don't know, just to push for CRT.
Uh-oh.
Make it happen. Make it happen. That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, we need a large truth telling. It needs to happen. The truth needs to be told.
And I wish, you know, well, I mean, controversy sells, so they won't frame it like this. But if folks don't like the words critical race theory, which is, we both know it's the legal history of basically legalized racism, right? But if they don't like that, they're still not going to like honest history. Right?
The truth. They don't like the truth. So yeah. but it explains and informs how we got to this point. Okay,
But
pretty simple.
and this, okay, I know. Okay, we gotta go. But this is the thing that, because you and I, as Jews, like we live in a very Christian society. But this is the genius of Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King. This is the genius of James Baldwin, because they held up a mirror and they said, your values and your teachings are saying the truth will set you free, that you have to confront your demons in order to move forward. But I don't know, sometimes I feel like I'm losing my mind in a very like Christian country, because it's like, why are people so allergic to the truth? And I know the fear of when you open up that box, what folks are gonna find. But like, it's okay. Like we're adaptable humans. We can create new identities and new ways of being. But I think there's so much fear. But I always just try to hold up a mirror and be like, this is what y'all said. So
that, you know, that we can find that in our Jewish teachings too, which, I mean, I know we don't have time, but if you study Musar, then it is in there. And there's just the shame around all of that too, of what we did in the past. Well, not what you and I did, but what was done in the past, and not wanting to confront that.
Yeah.
You say it happened. I mean, so bad things happen. Bad things happen. You cannot fix that, but you can fix right now. You can fix it now.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Let's end on that now. I like that. You can't change it all, but you can change something right now, and you could do something today. And I love that message. And plant those fruits so someone can eat in a couple years, or even when we're gone, someone will be eating. So look, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, Joe Brooks does the Fridays. I do the Sunday Spotlight series, Community Works Institute, communityworksinstitute.org. Check them out. They have professional development opportunities. They have institutes. They have cool videos like this. You could, look up a bunch of smart people and hear people talk about the world. Jill Housen, do you tell the folks one more time how they can find you and how they can, link up with you?
So I am 3W Consulting, and you can look us up online.
Cool. Well, what's your website?
If you look up 3W Consulting on Google, if you Google that, and there's a couple. So it's Tamara Gedalia, Jill Housen, and Denise Delta.
Okay, 3W Consulting, folks, you know where you need to go. Go check that out. Jill, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Hang on for a minute. We'll talk after, but everybody else, thank you so much for being here. Have a beautiful rest of your weekend, and take care.